Well, today's the day you've all been waiting for. We're going low. Hey, this is Brian. Thanks for watching Kies Motorsports. If you like our videos, give us a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe and check us out at kiesmotorsports.com. We are super excited because today we are installing these B16 coilovers by Bilstein. Something that's very unique about this Bilstein kit is it's going to have a little button that gets installed inside the car, and we can control the dampening from comfort to sport. Now with this kit, I do have an all-wheel drive car and I don't want to be scraping everywhere, so this kit is going to enable me to lower the front and back between 30 and 50 millimeters. But before we get started, let's take some measurements of how the car sits now so we can compare it to the after, and then we'll get installing. Before we get started, let's take some base numbers. Now, before we even start measuring, I do want you to know that this does not have stock springs on it. The person who owned the car before me put BMW springs on it. However, I think they put the performance springs from BMW for a rear-wheel drive car. So needless to say, the suspension on here is complete garbage. So you may have different measurements, but just wanted you to know about that. All right, so the front wheel is about 26 1/8 inches. And in the rear, we are right at 26 inches. Let's get started. For this process, we're going to start at the top. If you haven't done this already, you just take a 10 millimeter and rotate these plastic nuts 90 degrees counterclockwise. This will pull out like that. And you can just set this out of the way for now. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take a 13 mil. We're going to loosen, there's 3 of these bolts. There's one over here, and then one back here. And then there is an E-Torx over there. Now we're not going to take these completely out yet. We will in a minute. But we want to make sure that we have at least one that's going to be holding up our suspension. So that's loose, but we haven't completely removed it yet. Next we can remove this E-Torx, which is an E18. And one thing that I didn't mention, but we already disconnected the battery, especially when you're working this close, you could easily spark it and cause some problems. So save yourself a headache and disconnect the battery before you start the project. So now what we're going to do is remove our ABS sensor here. Gonna get that out of the way. Actually, what we'll do while we're here, I'm just gonna completely unplug it so it pulls out of this little metal holder in the back. And then you just press on this little tab and completely disconnect it so it's not going to be in our way anymore. Next, what we need to do is we need to remove this end link nut. The best way that I found is if you have a wrench like this, an open-ended wrench that has the ratcheting portion, you slip that on there and you're going to loosen the nut, and then you need a little T30 to hold this in place. Now, it's very important that when you have your ratchet, you set it like you're going to tighten it, because you need to have it pulling against you as you're loosening. All right, so then we'll just twist this nut off here, just like so. We'll pop this out, and just so we don't lose the nut, we'll just lightly hand thread it on here. I'll move that out of the way. Next, you're going to need an 18 millimeter for the front and then a 16 millimeter for the back. You can remove this. Okay. And what I like to do is whenever I remove a nut or a bolt, I like to put them on the ground the exact same way they came out. So I'll put this facing the same direction. Then once you've done that, you can take this little bracket and just very carefully wiggle it out of the way. And then you can see here that we have our spindle spreader tool. If you don't know how to use one of these, we have a whole dedicated video that'll show you all the tricks on how to use this. But basically, what BMW does is they use a compression knuckle that's going to just compress your strut into place. So what you do is you take a little spindle spreader tool. Then what you do is you just very carefully twist it 90 degrees. And then what I do is I just take this completely out. And then once we've done that, you can see that if I just push down, that this is going to slide right off. Now, before I do that completely, I'm going to loosen this top bolt here. And I have all the weight down below on my knee. You can use a jack if you like, or if you have a second person who's not holding a camera, you can use them too. Set that over to the side. Then I can start to lower this down. And then our strut can be pressed down a little bit. You can rotate it out. And here's our strut. Here's some helpful information for you when you're reinstalling. If you start to bring this part out a little bit and you go to swing it back in and it's not able to go back in, what's happening is your CV joint up here is binding. So if that happens to you, just pull it out ever so slightly and just start to maybe twist a little bit and try to get that to seat correctly. Otherwise, if there's any resistance, do not force it in because you can mess up your axle. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna rest this on a jack just to relieve some tension. We're gonna get our new strut, we're gonna prep the new one and install it. Next, what you wanna do is you wanna make sure that you get the right strut. So as you can see, this is flat and it bends down. And this one over here, the Bilstein, it's flat and it bends down. If you have the wrong side, it's just gonna look different. So just make sure that you match that up. Otherwise, you could run into some potential issues and it's not gonna work. Now that we have this off, we can compress the spring. So to do so, you're going to need a reliable spring compressor. Do not cheap out on this because it can get very, very dangerous. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna use our spring compressor, and we'll link all these tools and parts in the description for you below. And we're trying to do this job with the car not too high off the ground because this is going to be a similar situation to you guys doing it at home if you're using jack stands. Hence why I'm sitting on the floor. Now that I have my spring compressor set up, what we're going to do is we're going to just crank this down by hand. And I really like this spring compressor. I've tried a bunch of different styles, but this seems like it's by far the safest. Basically, the way that it works, it has these different size perches, we'll call them, and it sits into this little groove right there behind this piece. There's actually metal underneath the plastic, and that's going to make sure that it doesn't slip off. And it has a variety of different sizes, so no matter what size your suspension, you'll be able to get it off relatively easy. And with that, we're able to spin this with relative ease, which means that this is compressed enough. Then we need an 18 millimeter to go over the bolt like that. And then we need a 6 millimeter, which is going to go through our socket here and into the bolt on the strut. And that's gonna make sure that everything stays nice and tight. So then you're going to just separate it, okay? And then even though it's not under load, just keep your face away from the top just in case something does happen or it's not as loose as you thought it was. Now, whoever put this on last cross-threaded it, so it's good I'm going to some upgraded ones anyway. Okay. As we just saw, very uneventful, but this is destroyed and these struts are completely trashed. Now for this process, we are going to need part of our dust shield, so make sure you take that off. And the cool thing about the Bilsteins, they have internal bump stops, so you do not need to reuse your old ones. Now, how do you know, while we're here, how do you know if your strut is bad? If it goes quick, it's dead. Okay, so first off, this is horrendous. Let's do the exact same thing with our new one. And I think OEM would have even been a drastic improvement. All right, so I'm 205 pounds and I can't even compress it. So, so there's your test. These win. I'm gonna do it with my thumb. When you're done with these, make sure you put them in a safe place. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to slide these up. We're gonna preset it a little bit. So I'm gonna set it pretty much at like, we'll say the halfway point. We're gonna have it a little higher than lower just to start because it's typically easier to lower the car and to spin these than it is to raise them and have to compress them again. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna count the threads and I'm going to mark it exactly the same on the other side. And this is gonna get us just a good base before we do any corner balancing. Now what we're gonna do is we're going to cut our factory dust shield. I'm just gonna cut it, we'll cut it 3 down just to give us a little extra. And this is just gonna sit in the top hat and protect it. Okay, so that's gonna sit on just like that. Now what we can start to do is we can start to assemble everything. So we're gonna take our spring, and it's gonna sit down just like that. And then on this piece of rubber, you're going to notice that there is a little groove that the end of this spring needs to sit on. So you can do it with or without the top part on. Just spin it until it stops. So then we'll take our top hat and we will put this on. Now, depending on how low you're going to go, you may be able to get that nut on, and sometimes you're just not gonna be able to. You have 2 main options. You can either use your spring compressor again and compress it down, or this is very close that if I just put a little pressure on it, I'm gonna have Zach just get the nut, get a couple threads on, and then from there, we're gonna tighten and torque everything down. Okay, cool. Once we've done that, Bilstein says, torque it down to 45 Newton meters. All right, now when you're reinstalling this, what you need to do is A, be very careful of the cord, put the cord in first, kind of bend it down a little bit, and make sure that nothing is getting pinched with that. And then the second thing, you have to look for this little notch right there. And the little notch, what that's going to do is it's going to slide into this groove where we had to spread the spindle. So at this time, I'm going to carefully put that down there. Then I'm going to move my jack stand out of the way. I'm just going to support that with my leg for now. Actually, I want to go up first. So I'll go up. I'll feed this part down here. And I'm going to get it and make sure that we get that little notch to sit in that groove, and then it's going to sit all the way down like that. Once you've done that, you can take your spindle spreader out. So again, I always like to make sure that everything is completely down as far as it can go. We're gonna twist that, and then we're good to go on that front. We just have to make sure that everything over here is going to be lined up. Okay. So my initial test fit is telling me it looks pretty good, but it is not perfect. So again, I'm just going to relieve some pressure with my leg. And I'm going to get one of these, this bolt here. I'm just going to start to lift this up. All right, and then once you get the first one in, you can start to relieve some pressure, and we're gonna just lightly thread the remainder in. All right, so the E-Torx gets tightened down to 56 Newton meters and 90 degrees. Then we're gonna torque down these three. Then we can put our bracket back up here, slide our bolts, and this is going to get torqued down to 44 Newton meters plus 90 degrees of rotation. Then what you can do is just start to reroute your ABS sensor, like so. And make sure you plug it back in. Now what we can do is take our end link, and we'll press it down and pop it in. What you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to loosen your end link on the other side, because right now, if you just have the one in, what's happening is the other side is high and this one is low. So it's gonna make it all wacky. So just take out the other one and then this should go on with relative ease. I'm gonna torque this down to 56. All right, at this point, the front is pretty much done. We're going to save some of the wiring for a little bit later. Let's get the back installed, and then what I'm going to do off camera is I'm going to do the other front and I'm going to do the other back. So this time, let's move back there and show you how to do the rears. Now we put the car a little bit higher off the ground so you can see what's going on, but for the rear, you're going to need to remove this. It's there's 4 10 millimeters, and they're just the nuts. So there's one there. There should be one there. And there's one there. 3 out of 4 is not bad. Once you've done that, you're going to need a 21 mil and a 21 mil for this bolt over here. And if you have some kind of power tool, it helps because that bolt is typically very, very tight. And this other one is an 18 and an 18. All right, great. And then what we're gonna do, we're gonna put it back down like we're working on jack stands. We just wanted to be able to get a good shot of this, and it was just really, really dark. So let's lower the car back down, and then we can continue with the process. Now you don't have to do this right now, you can do it later, but we're going to remove these 3 E12s so that we can get this strut out. But before we do so, look at this. It's rusting. So pretty sure this one's bad too. Gonna ride like a whole new car. All right, let's do a little test to see how bad this one is. Yeah, I should not be able to compress that like that. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna pop out the bolt that's holding this in place. Might as well compress it, and I'll pull it out. Look how slow it is to rise. This is atrocious. Now what we need to do is we need to very carefully jack this up so that we can relieve some pressure. And then what that's gonna do is it's gonna enable us to get this bolt out, which can be a little tricky. And then from there, we can lower the spring down. There we go. Then what you can do is slowly lower this down, and we can pull our spring out. So what you do for this, you just push down, and you're able to get the spring just like that. Now for the spring on the old one, we're not going to reuse the top part, but we are going to reuse the bottom part. So you're gonna wanna take that off and set it to the side. The other part that we're not going to use is this part right in here. Now if you take like a rubber mallet or something, you should be able to just knock it down with relative ease, just like that, and it's gonna come out. And then what's going to happen is your spring is going to get assembled like this. So you have the spring, make sure your writing is facing right side up. You're going to have the little piece of blue plastic. Then you're going to have the spindle piece that you use to adjust the ride height. And just so you know, we already matched this thread with the other thread to make sure it's the same. And then there's this little rubber piece on top. And where this piece of metal used to sit Now this is going to sit, it's going to go just right up here, just like this. So now what you're going to do, you're going to put this in here and spin it until it hits the end like that. And then this little rubber notch is going to face you. And you'll see on this piece of metal in here where it needs to go. It goes right where my finger is right there. So just like we did before, you want to lower this in, make sure that that notch is lined up. And then if you need a little bit more clearance, you can just push down with your hand. And then you put this up in that groove, just like that. So right now we have our spring installed. And before we bolt that in, we need to make sure that we get our new shock and install that. So now what we need to do is we need to switch this top part over to our new Bilstein shock. So we're just going to take a screwdriver and just lightly pry that off there. Oh my gosh, what happened in there? That's not looking too good. Good time to change these. So now we need to do same exact thing how we did the front, except this is not under load, so it's a little bit easier to do. Sometimes it's easier, especially if you have one that's completely destroyed like this and you're not going to use it again, to just get some kind of vice grips and grab right here again, because these are just gonna be trashed, and then you can just pull it off with an impact. It might be a little bit quicker and easier, especially since we're replacing the nut, and this is going in the trash. And then when you're done with your badge strut, make sure you put it in a safe place. It's stuck in the ground. And then we're gonna put this top portion on, as you'd imagine. And the nut on this one is a 17, and it's a T30 in the middle. It's a little different than the other one. Then once everything's torqued down, you can put your little protective cap back on, but as we just saw, it doesn't really do much. Okay, good to go. Make sure that when you're feeding this in, that you have it in the correct orientation, especially with the bottom portion here. So when you're doing this, be very mindful of where you want your wire. I want my wire to go towards the rear of the vehicle because I already see where I want this to be fed. So at this time, we can put this part down here very carefully. Your spring may pop out while you're doing this, but it's okay. We'll go like that. And then I'm going to just very lightly thread these in. And that's more so it just doesn't fall out or anything. Now what we're gonna do, we're going to jack this up just a little bit so we can get one of our bolts on. Just make sure nothing's getting pinched, especially if you have this kit with the little wire. All right, and we got the shock in. Now I'm just gonna reposition this a little bit over here. We need this bolt to line up. This is the hard one. The shock is normally pretty easy. It's not normally an issue. Just so you know, this may take you a little bit to get the bolt all the way through because it's very tight down in here and just requires a little maneuvering. So right now, I need to actually relieve a little pressure. Okay, got it. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're going to secure the top here, these E-torques, and they're gonna get torqued down to 28 Newton meters. And then the bolt on the bottom, it's 100 Newton meters and then 90 degrees of rotation, and you should always replace it. All right, and then for the other bolt, it's 165 Newton meters. So it's a big one. At this point, the front is done, the rear is done. We're going to go do the other side of the car. Now on the other side of the car, you gotta be careful because there are these little sensors for xenon lights, obviously only if you have xenons. So just be careful. They're 10 millimeter, you just take it off and then you can lower everything down. Other than that, we're done on this side except for the wiring. Zach and I are just gonna go over, we're gonna bang out the other side off camera just to help speed up some time because it does take a lot of time to do this. And then we're gonna show you how to wire everything up and we're good to go. At this point in the process, if you have traditional coilovers, your job's pretty much done. You just need to put these bottom pieces back on and put your wheels on and call it a day. We still have to run all of the wires. So because the system is electronically controlled, we have to run these extension cables from each wheel up to the front of the car, and it's gonna pretty much go under the radios, kind of under the cup holder area. So at this time, what we need to do is just make sure that we have plenty of slack. You have to account for the suspension moving up and down, so we're gonna start zip tying it. And then we're going to find an existing body hole. We popped out this cover earlier. This is going to be a good spot for us to go through. So we're gonna go through there, and then we're gonna get it back into the trunk, and then we're going to run it all the way up to the front of the car. For this process, we are going to time lapse some of it because there's no real specific way that you have to do it. You just basically want to find the path of least resistance, and you want to make sure that you have plenty of slack so that as your suspension components are moving, that nothing's going to get ripped out, pinched, or damaged in any way. All right, so I'm going to give myself plenty of slack. Use a bunch of zip ties, make sure everything is exactly where we want it. All right, so that's a good base location. And what we can do, take this, and it's a watertight seal, so you don't have to do anything else on and around it. Put another one here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to continue feeding this wire. Now, if you look over here where we have the zip tie, we were able to pull out one of those little plugs over here, and if you push it through, it'll come out right here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our connection, we put a little hole in here, and this is just to keep out as much water and what have you as possible. We'll just feed this through, and then I'm going to electrical tape our wire here to our zip tie. Okay, and we'll just continue to just carefully pull it through here. And we can take off our electrical tape. And once you have it where you want it, we're gonna push that in. To make it extra weather tight, we'll say, what I'm gonna do after we're done shooting today, I'm gonna come back and put a little silicone on here just to make sure that no water or bugs or anything are gonna get in that hole. So now that we've done this, we're gonna do the exact same thing on the other side. The process is pretty much the same because there's a hole on the exact same spot on the other side of the car. So I'm gonna go do that off camera. We're gonna trim up these zip ties, and then we're gonna start to feed those wires up. And then what we'll do is we'll do the same thing on the front. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we are going to start with the passenger front. To do this, whenever you're doing this at all, if you're looking for existing body, like pretty much holes and whatnot and cavities you can go through, what we typically do is we'll shine a light. And then, so example, we have a light shining down here. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's my hand. We figured out just by, again, just following the light, that if we go through that hole, we can go this way. So we're gonna have the wire come up. It's going to go behind the fender liner. I'll show you where we're talking about right over here. So as you can see, we have some light. So we're gonna feed the wire up through here, and then we're gonna make sure that it is neat and out of the way over here. And then we're gonna do pretty much the same exact thing on the other side. Then once we get it in place, we're going to feed it through this plastic grommet. There's one, not in the exact same location, but a very similar location. Let's go over to the other side, and we'll show you where this one is. So this one is just right here again. After we do it, we're gonna silicone it because all of the water from here will drip on it, and I don't want water in my car. So after we were just looking at this, what we're going to do, we figured out that we have enough cable to go from this side across over and out that grommet as well. So this way, we're only gonna have one point of entry instead of having two. And this is gonna save us from having to disassemble the driver's side. We're just gonna have to disassemble the passenger side. We'll drop the glove box, take the under plastics out, and then everything will be right where we need it. So that's cool because we're gonna have the wires in the back come up on the passenger side, and then we're gonna have these wires all go on the passenger side. So everything is going to be in the same exact location. So I think this is a much better approach. So at this time, we're gonna feed some wires and we'll see you inside the car. All right, we are ready to lower the car for the very first time. Now, I'm not expecting it to be perfect on the first try. Normally it takes a little bit of adjusting, and we do want to eventually get this car corner balanced, which would be cool for the track as well. Now, one thing that I will say is if you're lowering your car, whether it be on springs or on coilovers, don't run out and get your alignment right away unless it's really bad. Typically with springs, what they need to do is they need to settle. So what I'm going to do, as long as the car looks pretty good, I'm gonna let the car settle for about a week or so before I do any fine tuning. Now obviously if the back is way too slammed or the front is way too slammed, we're gonna adjust it and get it pretty good, but we're not gonna do the final adjustments for about a week or so. And then once we have everything adjusted, then we're gonna go get our alignment and call it a day. Now we mentioned that it may need some adjustment, and as you can see, we put a lift kit on. Again, you got to make sure that you're going to account for the springs lowering and settling. So the back raised, let's see, or the front raised, let's see how the back did. Oh, the back raised a little bit too. But again, it's going to settle, so not really worried about it. I am going to bring the front down because I can fit my shoe in there pretty easily. So we're going to adjust that. We're going to finish the electronics. We'll be good to go. All right, and that should do it. Let's try that again. All right, after a little adjustment, we're down over a half, I guess about a ½ inch or so. But again, it's going to settle. So we have to make sure that we account for that. The back, I'm gonna leave as is for now. It's pretty much stock ride height. But again, once it settles, it's gonna settle a little bit lower. So I just wanna make sure that everything is settled in before we start to do all the fine adjustments and get the car aligned and whatnot. Now that all of the hardware is fully installed, what we want to do now is get it away from the lift so we can open all of the doors, and we're gonna finish the wiring. Now for this next part, what we're going to do is we're going to start feeding all of these wires up to the front of the car. We're gonna start in the rear. Now, if your car does not have a roll cage, it's gonna be a little bit easier. Typically, you just fold down the seat and it makes it a lot easier. But we're just gonna have to work around some things, and as you can see, we already have some of the carpet out. Before we do that, let's go prep the car. We're just gonna pull up some plastic trim. We're gonna fly through this because if you're taking on a project like this, you probably already know how to do a lot of that. So let's step over here, we'll pull up some panels, and then we'll continue feeding the wires. So again, because we have a cage, we're gonna have to be a little cautious of that, but if you pull out the side of your seat, you should have plenty of room to walk around. Also, we already have our seat unclipped. There's a little pin here, and most of this trim, you just get your hand under and it'll pull straight up, and it just has these little tabs that hold it in place. Most of the time they'll stick in the car. So at this time, just remove all of this plastic, pull this out like that, and as you can see, we've already removed some of the trim from the front. As far as the front is concerned, you're gonna have to just drop down this under plastic here that sits underneath your glove box. If you haven't done this, there's a 10 mil here, there's a 10 mil here, and then when you pop it down, there's a light, which I've already taken out, and then you may have this 12 volts. So once you disconnect that, this will come completely out. All right, now that we have all that prepped, we can start to feed our wires. You will notice that I wrote RR and LR. That is for left rear and right rear, so I know which is going to which when we go to actually wire everything up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just start to feed these wires through, and then what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll secure everything with zip ties. So just leave some slack for now. We're just gonna basically get the wires up to the general area of where we need it to go, and then we'll take it from there. So what we'll do is we'll just feed the wires along this existing wire loom. Again, we're just gonna run them kind of rough for now, and then we'll go back and we'll secure everything down. Now what we need to do is we need to route these wires. Again, we have already pre-labeled them so we know what goes where. We need to get this through the firewall, through that little hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stagger these a little bit because it is a tiny hole that these have to get fed through. I'm going to start by taping this top one on, and we're going to tape the bottom one on. Okay, so we're going to take these, we're going to go right through that hole, which is going to bring it out down at the floor. So now I'm going to just very carefully reach up here. Here's our cable here. We'll start to just feed this through. And boom, look how easy that was. So now what we need to do is we need to find a location where we can install our pretty cool sport button. Now, looking all over, I wasn't exactly excited about just drilling a hole. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this where the 12 volt is. So we flip this up and then we have easy access to a button. So let me show you what we thought about and how we decided to do this. Now we did some test fitting the other day just to make sure that this is gonna work. So we left some of the screws out just to help make the video go a little faster here. So let me show you how to do this. So first thing you need to do is just lift up on this piece of trim here. Okay, then we can unplug this. I'm just gonna put it in the back seat. And what we can do is we can lift up on this piece of trim and set this out of the way. Then over here, this whole piece will pop up. Just set this out of the way. And then to get this out, you just stick a little trim tool in here and it's going to release the clip on this side, and then on this side, then as you'd expect, you can disconnect it. And then typically there's going to be a T20 screw right under it. Now, because we did this yesterday, we did some test fitting, we have already removed that screw. So now what you need to do is just continue to lift up on this. And then there's a little sensor right here. If you forget to plug this back in, your comfort access won't work. So if you do this installation, you do it in a similar fashion we did and it doesn't work, that is the first thing that you want to check. And then what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect our 12 volt. Now, when we flip this over, and I'm just going to take out this little rubber tray so it doesn't fall out, you will see your 12 volt. And as you can see, it is a very good size. Now, there's a little piece of plastic that you're going to have to remove to be able to do this. There's a couple clips that hold this in place, but when you look at yours, you're going to have this piece, it's maybe 3/4 of an inch or so. What we did is we just took a Dremel and we just cut it flat off. And the reason that we did that is because we need something that's going to secure this button into this hole. All right, so to install your button, you're gonna remove the little plastic nut from behind. We're gonna feed our wire through, just like that. And as you can see, we did some test fitting. It fits perfect. They made this, it's almost like it was made for this spot. But the problem is, if you put this on the back, it's just gonna fall through. And option one was maybe use some 3M tape or maybe use some kind of glue, but I still want it to be reversible in case we, I don't know, ever end up pulling it out. I don't think this is ever gonna leave the car, even if we sold the car or changed suspensions over time. So what I wanted to do is make it a more permanent solution. So the thought that I had was if I could get some kind of plastic that would sit and overlap a little bit over here and overlap a little bit over here, what we could do is we could thread this on and it would hold it in place. So I looked around the shop to see what I had, and I had an old mirror cap dud. And as you can see, we cut a little square off it. So we cut a little square off to make this little carbon fiber square thing that's gonna never be seen and just hold this on. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to thread this on like this, and then we're going to take our plastic nut thing. We're gonna start to thread it on. And this ended up being the perfect size, so we're very happy with how it fit. As you'd expect, make sure that you have this nice and straight before you tighten it too much. All right, so that is not going anywhere. As you can see, super tight. Everything looks pretty straight. Gotta straighten it out just a little bit. But overall, this is going to secure it in place really nice. And it's going to give it that OEM finish. Zach, you know what else would be cool here? Boom. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to find a spot for this. Now, again, when we were doing some test fitting, we found that if you just take it and just slide it under here, that it should be well out of the way. There's carpet, so it's not gonna be moving around, it's not gonna vibrate, make any noise. So we're gonna leave it there. And while we're here, what we're gonna do is we're going to get our wires out that we'll need. There's 2 wires we're after. So first off, we're after this one because this is going to connect to our new little button that we just installed. And as you can see, you can mount this anywhere. Some people like to mount it under the glove box. While we're here, this makes a lot of sense and it's completely out of the way. And this way, if we ever need to get to anything, everything is pretty much in one location. And then what we can do, there's a wire in here that we're gonna have to tap for power and ground. And then we have all of the other connections that are to each corner of suspension. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take all of these and I am just going to route them down and out through here. I may have to do them one at a time depending on how tight it is. Have them all down here and out of the way. Now what we're going to do is we are going to get power to this unit. So according to Bilstein's handbook, there are 3 different wires as we see here. The brown is the ground, the black is not ground. The black is going to be positive 12 volt when the car is on accessory mode or started. And also the red one is going to be a battery constant. Now, I don't want the system to be powered when the car is off. So what I am going to do is I'm going to twist these together. So if you want to run it straight back to the battery, that's completely up to you. Now, since we took out the 12 volt, what we're going to do is we are going to power it and ground it actually using the old plug from the 12 volt socket. And with this socket, what it's going to do is after the car goes to sleep, it's going to kill all power. So this way, the system is going to have no power at all when the car is off, which is what we want. So just a little disclaimer there, we are deviating from the directions ever so slightly. So do it however you prefer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a posi tap, and if you haven't used the posi tap before, these are a great way to splice wires and they are extremely reliable. So basically with the way that it works is you feed 1 or 2 wires into the back here, and that pins them with plastic against a piece of metal. And then there's a little pin on the other side that's going to get the wire. It's going to go through here, and then the pin is going to pierce it. And again, it's always a very solid connection. I like these a lot more than the regular crimp ones. Now, before I do this 100%, I do want to start to wrap the cable up a little bit because it is way too long for where we need to be. All right, so then what we'll do, take our power ones. We're gonna go here. And the cool thing about all this too, you'll notice that there are fuses on these, and this is also fused, so triple fuse protection. All right, so then we'll do the exact same thing to the other one. And we'll make sure to put some links in the description for the posi taps that we use. All right, great. So that looks good, and what we can do now is we can start to push this out of the way, and I'm going to wrap up our power cable. And then after that, we're going to hook up our button, and then we can move on to finishing routing these wires, hooking everything up, and then testing everything out. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to hook up all of our different wires. And again, before you start pressing anything down, we did test fitting with this. Make sure that you're gonna have enough wire to get to where you wanna be. So I have my left rear. I'll hook that in. Then I have my right rear. Now they do have these little protective caps on them, if you didn't notice already. What that does is it protects the terminals and everything as you're feeding wire. So if it ever doesn't fit, just pull the cap off. It just makes it so if you're feeding through firewalls or whatnot, nothing gets damaged. Okay, this is the right front. And where I put right front, they put front right. So they do by location of the car, front to back first, and then they do left and right. All right, so then we have our last one here. Okay. Clip that in, and then what we can do now, we have all these wires here. We're just going to tuck them over here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to zip tie them back here. Now, whenever you're doing this, you want to be extremely careful about airbag positioning. So actually, you know what? We're going to go, we'll change the plan. We're going to just go in front here. But always stay completely clear of this, because if there's an accident, this is going to explode and you don't want any of these to hinder that. So we're gonna just run them along the front. I'm gonna zip tie them. And then what we can do is we can remove this panel here, and we'll just zip tie the extras in here. So if there's any extra slack or whatnot, we're gonna have super easy access to it. So at this time, I'm going to start securing these, and then we'll start zip tying the lines back, put the car back together, and we're done. At this point in the process, we have finished buttoning everything up. We connected the battery. Now let's go take it for a little test drive. So Zach and I have been driving around for about 20 minutes or so. We didn't want to just get the camera out right away and talk about it, because we wanted to experience a little bit more. And we'll probably make a follow-up video to give you further thoughts and everything, especially as the system settles and we get our alignment and everything complete. Initial reaction though, amazing. I have had cars before with suspension that you do coilovers or what have you, and you hit a bump and it's like, and it hurts and it's a pain. This is so comfortable, especially for being, you know, sport suspension. Both modes are actually pretty comfortable. We've been riding around in the sport mode and we were trying to film and Zach's camera kept going. So we definitely noticed that it's a little bit more aggressive, but still it's very comfortable. When you hit a bump, I'm actually aiming for bumps right now. It's not like it's not a harsh crash. You can tell that there's a ton of engineering that goes into the suspension. And again, it's Bilstein, so it's one of the best suspension companies in the world. So you'd expect something like this from them. And especially, I mean, I'm not gonna avoid the elephant in the room. It's not a cheap kit. So you kind of expect that. Another thing that I noticed with this kit, other than how comfortable it rides, is one of the problems that we had before when we would go to the track is you could feel the whole back of the car just dip down, and you could feel the front lift up. With this kit, when we go, everything just stays nice and level. You can feel a very slight lift, but before it was complete, it was terrible. It was like we're gonna blast off into space. So that's something that I really like about this kit, how I feel like we're able to really just stay more level and really get that power to the ground. And I'm not gonna do it because I don't want Zach to get sick any more than he already is. But we've taken some turns pretty hard, and there is very, very, very minimal body roll. Body roll was a big thing, and as to be expected with stock suspension with blown out shocks and struts. So we went from, you know, one polar opposite to another. But the thing that I really like about this most is that it feels like a really, really nice car. OEM suspension that is, you know, something more like you find on an F80 or what have you. Like the F80 has a really nice ride. It's pretty firm, but it's still very comfortable. Where I feel like a lot of aftermarket companies, when you put the coilovers on, your car looks good because it's at a good ride height. Maybe it's handling a little bit better, but I feel like a lot of aftermarket companies don't get the dampening down, and Bilstein completely crushed it with this kit. Also, as you'd expect with Bilstein, the button and everything is just very high quality, and to flip it in sport mode, it's literally just pressing a button. So now we're in sport, now we're in comfort, and I think it has completely transformed this car. Now we do have a couple other things coming up that have to do with how the car drives, but this was a major milestone for this car, and honestly I wish we did this when we first got the car 2.5 years ago. Really can't wait to take it on the track. Now, after having it like this, I can't believe we took it to the track with the stock suspension, just because this is completely drastic from what it's been. So now if you are in the market for suspension, this is a very well-built kit, and something that we said before, I like how it has 2 electronic modes. It has the comfort and also the sport. If you do want to fine-tune it, you can also get the kits that don't have this, that have the little wheel that you just click it and you can set your setting. But the problem is, the reason that I didn't go that route is I wanted multiple settings, because even from the factory, most of these cars nowadays have different settings of dampening that you can do. So I felt like that was just really important to me, rather than being able to dial in one perfect setting. And so far, this doesn't disappoint. And again, Bilstein just completely crushed it. So as you can see, after just driving around for a little bit, we already have had some settling, and I think it looks amazing. I kind of want it to stay here. I don't want to go too much lower because I don't want to scrape everywhere I go. But let's see. Now we're on rock, so we definitely dropped a little bit in the back. I didn't want to go super low in the back. I just wanted to shave it just a little bit. Front was where it was the biggest difference. So now we're about 25 inches. I think before we were at 26 1/4, so if I remember correctly, 26 1/8. So dropped about an inch in the front, and then I think we dropped about a ½ inch or so, I can't remember the number, in the back. But this is where I wanted to drop the most, and does not disappoint. Once again, this is Brian. Thanks so much for watching Kies Motorsports. If you liked today's video, give us a thumbs up, make sure to subscribe, and check us out at kiesmotorsports.com. And for all the products and tools we used in today's video, be sure to see the links down in the description. Once again, my name is Brian. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.